Good morning. Thank you, Francisco, for the excellent presentation. And thank you to Javier Cremades, Benita, Ferreira Waldner, and Diego Solana for the invitation to be here today. I was listening to Francisco. Speak loud. Are you listening to me now? Okay. I was listening to Francisco and thinking that his presentation was brilliantly putting the problems that I've encountered as I prepared the presentation about cybersecurity and the Portuguese legal system today. And one of the reasons has to do with one problem he just mentioned, is that technology is moving a lot faster than regulation. And this is probably a first for mankind. Before, we had the time to reflect about regulating something and only later on doing the regulation. Now what's happening is that the regulation is going faster. And though I have here a text, I'll try also to look at what Francisco was saying, and to look at it. If you noticed, he started his presentation with a very interesting case, Stuxnet, which was, if I remember correctly, a malware rumored to have been put into the Iranian uranium enrichment program by either a United States agency or an Israeli agency or an agency for some country. So this creates a lot of problems from international law immediately. We have two countries, technically not at war, where one is trying to destroy a program of another, a program that has been internationally banned. But anyway, it's a very complicated issue, an issue I'm not going to dwell on, but it apparently is a lot simple. When a country just sends an airplane and bombs something in another country, then we all know what's happening. But if countries do this, and we're not just talking about Stuxnet, we can be talking about what China and Russia are rumored to do permanently to our companies and to even the states, it becomes a very, very complicated problem. Even now, Facebook and Google are preparing to deliver to the United States authorities evidence about how Russians may or may not have influenced the American election. So this creates very, very complex legal problems. We're mostly lawyers here, and I don't think any of us has really a response how these issues should be addressed. But addressed, they have to be, and they have to be addressed quickly. Going into a more simple perspective, the individual perspective, my wife arrived home one of these days, about a year ago, and she couldn't access the family photos. She couldn't access the family photos in her home computer, a portable. She couldn't access a lot of things, and it was closed. And then she received an email from somebody saying that if we paid 2 or 3 bitcoins, they would release the computer. This is a very serious crime. We didn't report it to anybody. One of the things that we've been discussing in Portugal with the Portuguese cybersecurity agency is that reporting of cyber crimes should be made a lot easier for people, even just to report for email, just so that the authorities have the knowledge how many times this is happening, a knowledge they don't have, and which is critical, because this is happening all the time. And what I can tell you is that even hiring the best, I mean, the issue was relatively serious. A lot of photos, 3 or 4 years of photos of our kids, the family, everything went away. Like most people, she doesn't do any backups. I don't do any backups. It's absolutely opened out there. So disappeared. We decided not to pay, though very kindly the email explained, well, if you don't know how to use Bitcoin, this is what you have to do. And one cybercrime expert told me that there were some kind of criminals, and this looked like that actually, if paid, will release the system, and there are others, of course, who don't. But it puts terrible problems. So no one is ever safe from the dangers of cybercrime. Sometimes as individuals or small businesses, we may think that we are, but we aren't. And the statistics make that very clear.
You lost the photos.
Yes, I lost the photos. We were then able to recover some, but not all. And one of the issues, and again I'm referring to Francisco's presentation, is that, as he made very clear, cybercrime cancels out the notion of jurisdiction. As lawyers, first thing we look when there's a crime is, what is the jurisdiction? If something happens here in Spain, it's going to be Spanish law. If something happens within the cyberspace, what law are we going to apply? It is a very complicated problem, because even if it happens in Spain, it can have originated somewhere else. And that somewhere else can be anywhere. And even if we find out where, we still have a lot of problems in finding out who the agent, the person who committed the crime, is. Frequently, we're talking about a group of people working for an organization. So these matters about cybercrime and cybersecurity, they come in a way that they completely change the way how we view these issues. And so far, no perfect solutions. Well, law doesn't have perfect solutions, but no perfect solutions have arrived. One seems clear. Jurisdiction is no longer enough. We need international cooperation. We need a lot of international cooperation. And it's very complicated to determine the person involved. This has led some authors to choose that, to say that instead of looking for the traditional form of responsibilizing the agent, you know, as we typically do, if somebody dies because he was shot, we look for the person who had the gun and pulled the trigger. Now they say we should look at the dimension of the attack. And so if the attack has a national dimension, then we're talking about applying international law. It's something to be dealt between countries. If it has a smaller dimension, it should probably be the usual and traditional criminal law. So these problems, and I'm not bringing any solution, I'm probably just telling you, enunciating them, and then telling you what solutions Portuguese law, which is mainly European Union law, has adopted so far, is really a point that becomes very, very complicated. First, our national strategy, the Portuguese national strategy on cybersecurity has a terrible problem. They can't find enough people. And the people they train, the private sector comes and hires them and pays more, just like military pilots. They just arrive and take them away. It's one of the main concerns. But Portugal has three important laws, all based in international conferences, like the Budapest Conference or so. First, we have the Portugal National Strategy on Cybersecurity, which is a resolution of the Council of Ministers. For lawyers to know, our Council of Ministers has a lot of legislative power, maybe too much, really, and then the Parliament has, and often they both have competing jurisdiction, which makes it a bit complicated. But so there's this Portugal National Strategy on Cybersecurity. Then there's the Portugal Law on Cybercrime, which dates from 2009 and is already a bit outdated. And if you go and look to the 1991 law, which is our first law on matters concerning cybercrime, it really looks like something from the age of the stone. You know, it's just 24 years have gone by, nothing else in human behavior changed very much. Murder is still murder. robbing is still robbing, but cybercrime changed completely. So much that the 1991 law is totally, looks like something of the Stone Age, not really important anymore. And even this 2009 law is starting to put questions. And then we have the EU regulation 2016-67-9 of the European Parliament on the protection of the natural person with regard to the processing of personal data and the free movement of such data, which is hopefully going to give and is already giving a lot of work to law firms. So the Portugal national strategy on cybersecurity is based on 4 goals: promotion of a conscious, free, secure and efficient use of the cyberspace, protection of fundamental rights, freedom of expression, personal data and privacy, solidification of cyberspace security, its critical infrastructure and national vital services, and reaffirmation of cyberspace as a place for economic development. So Portugal created, with these goals, a national center for cybersecurity, which theoretically is very importantly, it works directly under the Prime Minister supervision, and it's seen and it's coordinated by the same cabinet that coordinates the armed forces. And the center has as its tasks exercise the powers as the competent national authority in the domain of cybersecurity in relation to the state and the operators of critical national infrastructures. So they've named all critical national infrastructures that should be protected and permanently protected. The problem, as they say, is that this is constantly changing. They're constantly having more. Ensuring the production of legal benchmarks in the domain of cybersecurity. And they keep complaining that the law is outdated. No matter what changes you make, it's still outdated. Technology is moving very, very fast. And develop the capacities for the prevention, monitoring, and the reaction to cyber attacks, as well as contribute for the security of the information and communication of the state entities, operators of essential services, and digital services providers. Here, as a lawyer, I'll make a comment. I don't think anybody takes so badly care of our personal data or of our data as our own governments or government agencies. Private companies really take the issue seriously. They can be fined and so on and so forth. But our experience is that the state doesn't. Tax authorities have enormous amounts of information on all of us. They're not especially worried about that. In Portugal, for instance, public hospitals have a lot of information of any person. They don't take any important care of that information, and it's all a bit chaotic. And in the middle of this, we have to look for legislative responses. We have to think what's going to happen if a lot of personal data gets lost, or if it just appears somewhere, as has been happening in several countries. And the fact is, in most cases, nothing is being done. And so this is, and I don't want to take up more of your time, but this is really the issue. As lawyers, we're often talking about cybercrime. But then, if we look at the jurisprudence and decisions of our courts, the application in practice of criminal law on cases like this, you almost don't find one case. Nothing is happening. It's like we have a whole area of law, a whole area of economic activity, a critical area. We can't live with mobile phones anymore. You know, up to 2000, I didn't even have a mobile phone. Now I can't imagine not having one. And in this area, law is simply not reaching it. So the question I leave you with is, what are we going to do so that cybercrime stops being the Far West without any law and starts being a place where law also applies? Or did we reach a point where we're no longer capable of applying law to technology and what people do with it? Because, of course, technology is a good thing. Well, the problem is that it's sometimes wrongly used. And I think I would leave you with this question. Thank you very much.